the name of God, our Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Amen.
Amen.
You may be seated. Today we observe the Feast of All Saints. All Saints Day is a part of a triad or a threesome of feasts that are all linked. They all come at the same time. It's called All Hallows Tide. And the first one we know for the weight that it puts on us, right? Halloween. But actually, before it became a day for trick-or-treating, getting treats and tricking people and dressing up in costumes, it was a day observed in the church to remember our departed loved ones. So it's a day when I would remember my father, my great aunt who lived with me for 10 years before she passed away at 102. It's a day for us to remember our beloved people who have departed. In Latin culture, it's called Dia de los Muertos, right? Where they actually, and there's a comparable activity among Asians in China where they gather on the anniversary of the death of their loved ones and they actually have a picnic at the gravesite. All Saints is a part of this triad, and on All Saints Day we remember Martin Luther King, right? Mother Teresa, extraordinary saints who have either died because of their faith, because of their pursuit of righteousness, God's righteousness, or have died in the faith, doing extraordinary things. That's not me. I'm barely getting by with the ordinary things. I don't know about you. And then there's All Souls Day, where we remember our brothers and sisters of the church, right? And I'm told that are there names on these?
Yes.
Did you put names on these?
Yes.
Are they members and your family? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay, so they're literally flying up above our heads, right? And so this triad of festivals was created to help us understand that the army of God is composed of two major units. The church triumphant, that is to say, those who have died and gone before us, right? They're over our heads, symbolically here, with the doves on the mobiles. And the church militant, that's those of us who are still alive. Do you remember that from your Sunday school days? Did you remember what the church militant is? It's us. It's us. Have you got your full armor of Christ on? Are you ready? Are we doing battle? Well, I want to talk to you this morning about being aligned as church triumphant and church militant. We have a single purpose, and we rehearse this purpose every time we say the Lord's Prayer. What do we say? We say, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." So I'm presuming I would like to get to heaven, but in the way I see things, clergy, if there's a back of the list for getting into heaven, it's us clergy, bishops, archdeacons, priests. And the reason is that we are charged with modeling for you and preaching for you and teaching to you how to be good Christians, and we're limited, right? We're charged with this task, but am I made from anything different from you? I may have a unique DNA, but I have the same aptitude or likelihood when I'm angry to curse as some of you, right? And so I got this big thing on my shoulders. We've got this big thing on our shoulders as clergy, but it's a very big weight to bear. And the reality is that all of us bear this responsibility for heralding God's kingdom, God's reign, God's will. In fact, more than just talking about it, right? When we say, "Thy kingdom come," is that talk? That's to make it a reality. We're supposed to be making God's kingdom a reality on earth in the same way it is in heaven. I have a favorite childhood hymn that speaks about the working together of the church militant, us, and the church triumphant, my great aunt, my pop, your relatives and friends, church members who've gone before you. And it goes like this. This is the second verse. They loved their Lord so dear, so dear. Their love made them strong. And they followed the right for Jesus' sake, the whole of their livelong lives. And one was a soldier, and one was a priest, and one was slain by a great wild beast. And there's not any reason, no, not the least, why I shouldn't be one too. All right, thank you. Lord only knows she needed help with the tune, right? In the lesson that we hear from the epistles, Paul is speaking to the people of Ephesus. And he has a kind of a us first, you guys second. So he says, us Jews first were called. That's what he meant by the first. And then he said, and then you also. That would be all of us. We are Gentiles, right? All of us were then called. And he's pleased with how both the Jews who were called and the Gentiles in Ephesus were called and are realizing their calling. And he says, I pray for you all the time. I pray for you all the time. And here's what he's praying. He prays that we would have eyes, with or without our bifocals, eyes that are illumined so that we would know the purpose of the hope to which Christ calls us. So he's praying that we would all realize the purpose of this hope. And he goes on in such incredible glowing terms. The purpose of the hope of which he has called you, what the riches of his glorious inheritance for the saints are, and the immeasurable greatness of his power for those of us who believe. Doesn't this sound great? Right? Riches. Sounds like I should have more money in the bank than I do now. Immeasurable power. It feels to me, I was kvetching with the warden before church service about a topic that shall remain nameless. It feels to me like I should have immeasurable power so that when I kvetch with the bishop about what I think is not going right in our branch of Christendom, he might actually listen, you know? But, you know, he's the bishop and I'm a priest, so I don't think he always feels like he has to listen to me. But it feels like from Paul's letter to Ephesus that the calling is really positive, right? We follow Christ and we get a rich inheritance. We follow Christ and we have power as a church militant to make a difference in the world. The only problem is, I don't know about you, but I have actually stopped listening to the news. I did it about 2 weeks ago. When was the last presidential debate? I was done. Because as a citizen, as a citizen who comes from peoples, female peoples who didn't always have the right to vote, dark peoples who didn't always have the right to vote, indigenous peoples whose property and land were taken away from them because, you know, we discovered land, you know, indigenous people were living on like nobody was living there to begin with. I feel like there should be issues talked about instead of insults hurled, right? So I have stopped listening to the news, and it feels to me like these candidates, you know, I'm not going to show my hand here, but these candidates don't seem to be aware that our government has run amok. We are paying a lot of tax dollars for legislation not to be done, for judges to not be appointed. In fact, they believe that it's their right in our government to stonewall, or whatever it is they call it, debate, you know, and not appoint people to positions. And this, I have a personal stake in this. A number of years ago, in President Obama's first administration, my brother was nominated to be a federal court judge. I cannot tell you how long that poor man sweated before he had a confirmation hearing. And he would never have been given a confirmation hearing if in any of his publications He had voiced an opinion on anything that either Democrats or Republicans cared about. His work, his public work up to that point, had been with different justice organizations that work for the upholding of the Constitution in general, right? But not around any particular issue. The woman who on the same day had a confirmation hearing as he did is still waiting, and my brother has been appointed and sitting as a judge now for 2 years. So our elected officials feel that they have a right to earn money and not do their work. If you didn't do your work on your job, what would happen? Girl! Fired and then homeless. Fired first, homeless second. Right? And they would, I'm a boss now, so I see inside, traditional structures. We don't do this in the church, though I wonder that we should. When you leave your job, they fill out a form that says you've left, what date you've left, so they stop paying you. And then there's a little box. Do you know about this? That they check eligible for rehire, not eligible for rehire. So if we don't do our job, which box do you think they check? Tick. Not eligible for rehire. And what's going on is so much strife, so much struggle in this political environment. I'm wondering where the riches and the power of our inheritance are. I wonder, because I'm not feeling it right now. And you know what? Neither did Daniel. Let's look at the lesson, the first lesson. Daniel wasn't feeling the richness and the power. It says here that in the first year of the king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream. He had visions in his head when he was laying in bed. What does that mean? He was having a nightmare. He was having a nightmare. The poor man he not only was tortured in the day by whatever was going on, but it was so invading his consciousness that when he lay down at night to sleep, there was no peace. Now, it doesn't go into what the whole dream was, and in point of fact, it wouldn't be helpful. I mean, you can go and read it this afternoon, what comes between verse 3 and verse 15, but it's a lot of images and creatures, and it suffices to say it's not like a video from the news. But what's going on here that's being described in these incredible mythological terms is kind of what we're going through now. Wars. Kingdoms fighting one another. And Daniel came from a people in a small kingdom, and part of what's going on in this vision that he's having is it's a warning to him that as a kingdom, they're going to be taken over. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. They were going to face generation after generation after generation of persecution where they wouldn't even have a chance to cast a ballot to elect, I will leave off the adjective, a president. They won't even have the opportunity to do that. They are going to be held captive. They are going to be enslaved again. They're not going to matter. They are going to be seen as the source of problems. Right now, we hear in the news how the economy is unsteady, right? Who didn't know this, right? I don't know about you, but my same old salary for the last 10 years isn't buying what it did 10 years ago, right? And I can tell you for sure, as someone supporting my mother, because all she has is her Social Security check, is that is not covering the expenses of her home. And my brothers and I are sending her money on a regular basis, paying for her bills, doing repairs on her house, right? Well, this isn't new news to us who's gathered here this morning, right? But apparently it's new news to some people because they're upset, right? Or maybe it is that it's not new news, but they have this expectation that they wouldn't have to struggle, that there wouldn't be strife. Oh, no, wait a minute. Sometimes that happens to us as Christians, doesn't it, right? We got Jesus, something happens, and we say, my Lord, what happened? Right? Happened to me a few weeks ago. My house was burglarized. When I couldn't sleep that night, worried. You know what was on my lips. Why me? Isn't that where we go? And then I said, okay, now that's not fair. I'm an evolved person. So I went from why me with God to, okay, this isn't the worst thing that could possibly happen. Help me to deal with it, right? We go from why me to, oh my goodness, I can't cope. And I had the whole list of why I couldn't cope, right? I got this going on, I got that going on, I can't cope, right? My arms are too short to be boxing with you, God. I can't cope. So it's not just some people in the electorate who feel like Daniel, that even when they lay down, there's no peace, right? This happens to all of us at some point. So being a part of the Holy One, so going on in Daniel says, as for me, Daniel, my spirit is troubled within me, and the visions, they terrify me. So he goes for an interpretation of his dream. And in verse 18, the interpretation, verse 17, it says, there are 4 beasts which represent 4 kings, and they shall arise out of the earth, i.e. to crush and destroy you and your people. And in verse 18, but the holy ones, the New English Version translation of this verse says, but the saints of the Most High, now we're talking about us, right? The saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever. And as if forever isn't long enough, he goes on and says forever and ever. So it's forever, ever, ever, and ever, right? That's a lot of forevers. So we destroy the earth because of global warming, forever and ever. We possess the kingdom, even if there isn't an earth for us to stand on. Forever and ever, it's ours. But what you're beginning to get a picture of is that this being a saint in the church militant is a combination of glory, right? Glory and grace, strife and struggle. And now we're on to the gospel. I know that when I was doing scripture study in seminary, because I was an Episcopalian raised up in a church where there weren't no Bibles in the pew. So I had to go off to seminary to learn Bible. When I was in seminary, first really becoming a student of the scripture, the way this was taught, I don't think was complete. Because they acted as though the blessings were for us Christians, right? Blessed are you when you're poor, Jesus is going to give you some money. Blessed are you who are hungry or eat the wrong food and send your diabetes off, because Jesus is going to put you on the right diet. Blessed are you when they gossip about you. Jesus is going to take care of that one too. And then the woes, that wasn't us, right? That's them who didn't come into church. Woe to you who got some money, because we don't get your money. Woe to you who are full now, because we're going to take your food and give it to people who are hungry. Thanksgiving's coming. We're going to redistribute that food. Woe to you when they say good things about you, because it ain't the truth. And we know it. And so we do with this and us that. We're the ones who need blessing or are blessed, and it's those other people who need to watch out for the woes, right? The truth, though, come on now, right? The truth, though, no, just ride with me here. Just ride with me here. I'm not going to confront you yet. Just ride with me here. My life is a combination of graces and glories, struggle and strife. That's how my life is. The week my house was burglarized, I was looking out because I noticed that my neighbor right up to one side of me, his house was dark. He's older, his wife is in a nursing home, he's never not there. And when he's not there, either him or his kids tell me he's going on a trip, and they've got light timers and all that kind of stuff. They asked me to look after the kitty. And so I was concerned, especially because I was burglarized, that his house was perpetually dark. So the day after the burglary of my house, I noticed there were lights on in his house. Before I went into my house, I rang the doorbell, and his kids were all in the house. And I said, "Where's Daddy?" And they said, "He passed away this afternoon." So I went in and we talked, and I condoled with them. They're Roman Catholics, and I said, "Listen, I know I don't share your tradition, but I'm a professional funeral doer. So if you need any help, you know, I'm your lady." I said, but they said, what made you stop by? And I said, well, first of all, Daddy's lights are never out, and I noticed the lights were out. They said, "Oh, yeah, you've been so good like that as a neighbor." And I said, "Yeah, you know, I've been 14 years next door to Daddy." And they said, "Oh, has it been that long?" And I said, yeah, it's been that long. And I said, but the reason why I came by is that I want you to be cautious. Now that the house is empty, a couple of years ago, we had a series of burglaries. It seemed to stop. We were burglarized last night, and they were giving me, you know, sympathy, you know. So this is how life is, right? And then a couple of days later, myself and my family, we went to the wake for my next door neighbor, me and the kids. They were looking at us because, you know, I don't know whether you know where I live. I live in Wampa. And, yeah, hello. Yeah, hello. So we were noticed going into the wake, shall we say, because we were the, you know, only people of a darker hue. So people were looking at us. And we were easy to pick out in the crowd. So one of our neighbors came over to say, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you." She said, "You know, I heard you were burglarized. I'm so sorry. Can you watch out for my house? My husband had a heart attack this week. And I've been in and out. He took sick when he was working in the city, so I've been spending, you know, most of my days in the hospital in Manhattan. So just, you know, keep an eye for the house. The dogs are there, so hopefully that will scare people off." And we were condoling with her. And she said, "You know my crazy husband? They put the stent in, they did this, they put the, you know, the pacemaker in, and then he got his shoes and wanted to leave." and so we're sharing with her, and I said, "Listen, you know, with the other people, you know, I was reminding them that I was a professional funeral doer. I said, listen, I hear everybody's stories, and let me tell you how common it is, especially for the men's. But some of us ladies do this too. We get sick, we don't want to lay down. Something happens and we keep going. In fact, last time I was here, was not Mother Ella sick? She emailed me in the wee hours, calling me on the phone. I rushed to get here. She's sitting in her office. I was ready to kill a woman. So men and women, we do this. Something happens to us and we don't want to accept it, right? We're in denial. And I said to her, here's what I've learned from other people. You need to take his clothes and his shoes out of the hospital. So if he wants to discharge himself against doctor's orders, he's going to have to go out naked. And she was so grateful. She was so grateful because she felt like she was going crazy. She felt like she was the only person in the world going through that struggle with a husband who survived a heart attack. The miracles of modern medicine saved his life, and he don't want to lay down and take the treatment. But we're all in this world, are we not? We're all in this world where sometimes it even feels like we're split with one foot in the glory grace and one foot in the struggle and strife.